Hey everyone, so I've been wanting to make a video detailing optimizations that pro players should be making but almost never do, and today that time has come. So I've been compiling a list of these points for the whole year. The list is definitely not exhaustive, but I thought it would be a really fun kind of topic to talk about. Let's jump right into it. Let's start with vision, and the first point for vision is to fake ward. So let's say this is the enemy jungler. What you can do is just kind of walk up, stand still for like a quarter of a second, pretend like you warded over the wall, and then walk away. And some players have done this. I do this sometimes in my solo queue. This is the easiest example, but this can be translated to laning phase just as easily. Let's say you're playing mid, and you shove the first two waves or something, and then you'd like suspiciously dip towards fog and then come back a few seconds later. They're going to assume that you warded, and maybe their jungler will play like that area is warded without you even having to ward it, and then you can use your ward on another window or another side of the map, etc. This is the most important in the laning phase for any of the three lanes, and this is something that you can do even if you don't have your ward up. It is very unlikely that your enemy, your counterpart, is going to be tracking your trinket cooldown. So let's say you have no wards up, and then you kind of shove out a bot wave, and then you just move into here and just kind of stand around this area for a little bit, do that little stop to pretend like you've warded somewhere and then move straight back. The next point is to wait for early in the enemy team's turn to use your scry or your sweeper. So a lot of times what I see in pro games and solo queue games are like, players just kind of walk out and then they see a scrying plant and then they just hit it immediately. Maybe the enemy team has just based and they're just coming back out onto the map, and there's no way that they have set up their vision here yet. So what you should do is you time your vision denial with this plant to overlap with the enemy's turn. This takes a little bit of discipline. Pro players, they see a plant in front of them and they just want to hit it immediately. And so you can still pressure the map, you can still control vision, and once you think it is likely that the enemy team has dropped their wards in an area, maybe they've come back off of a reset and now they're back on the map contesting an area, then you sweep. So this is going to apply to the Scry's Bloom and your sweeper. In the mid to late game, the tempo that is the most important that you want to pay attention to is the enemy support. So maybe they've been using their wards and they're still on the map, and then you move to the other side of the map, and then you start to sweep when there's just no way that they would have any wards on that side of the map right now. So just be deliberate in your timing and usage of vision denial. The next point, this is something that you already see in the higher levels of play internationally, but in the smaller regions, it's not happening as much. So let's say you're doing Baron, and your pink is denying wards. You don't have to hit those wards, and it's especially important when every split second is of the utmost importance, maybe when you're trying to rush down Baron before the enemy team can contest. The next point is warding precision, and I've made several videos about this already. I'm going to link those in the description below. Just some common warding locations that pro players really need to start using is this ward over here. You can also do it on this side, this ward over here, just to dodge common pink locations, and I really hope that this is going to start happening more often. Pretty much every game I see in pro play, people put no precision into their warding, and it's not even just about warding in locations that can dodge common pinks. It's just about even in bushes, they're not putting it on the absolute edge of bushes, and this is something that you really need to start thinking about especially if you're a support player, but anyone who's using their trinkets. Next point is to start pink on junglers who don't need potions for the sustain, and jungle has been getting easier and easier to clear at a higher health value, especially when you have Gromp early on in your clear path. It's almost impossible to get really low on jungles nowadays. And so what I think jungles can experiment with is potentially starting pink with your jungle item, although I don't want to talk about this too much because obviously I don't play the role. The next vision point is actually warding micro in a weird way. So what I think people should do is to ward in front of enemy ADCs who A-move, and this is going to kind of like scale into the mid to late. The higher attack speed that the enemy ADC has, the more likely that they're A-moving instead of individually clicking accurately. And so the two main areas where I think this might be valuable is when you're breaking vision line with the enemy. And so what they likely to be doing is, so let's say this is an enemy ADC with really high attack speed, a Kalista with Rage Blade stacked up. And so you break vision line here, and then they're likely just going to A-move while you're in fog so that they can attack you immediately. And so what you can do is kind of drop a wards out of the bush so that is what they attack first. This could also just be applied in an open setting as well if you think that the enemy is likely attack moving. And then the last use of warding micro is, let's say your ally uses stopwatch, then what you can do is just kind of spam wards on top of your ally so that it's likely that they attack the wards instead of your ally. This is the same concept as like spam warding a lantern because they really want to deny that click. You can do the exact same thing here. Okay, let's move on to laning and wave micro. So what players can do is to base to bait cooldowns. So let's say the lane is in a bit of a stalemate and you're not really contesting prio and you're just kind of hanging around. What you can do is just pretend that you're basing. You know, you lose practically nothing from doing this if you're just not contesting prio anyway. And then it is just ingrained in players' like psyche or muscle memory to really try and stop bases, and you can bait cooldowns like this pretty easily. So you're just challenging your base and then they move up and they try to cancel your base and then you just dodge, you know, and then they've wasted the cooldown. This is something that can be used much more. If it does get used more, then the enemy will start to think, is he kind of baiting? Should I even try and stop this base? And then sometimes you'll be able to just get greedy recalls off. Or other times you're basing and then they try to move forward and then they get ganked or something. So it can become a whole minigame in itself. In a way, it's information denial, because normally what players do is they base when they want to base, and they don't hide their intentions at all. So sometimes, if you just base more, the enemies won't know if you're actually basing, or if you're baiting, or just trying to waste their time. Okay, this next point I see in practically every pro game I've watched this whole year. Players don't deny minions to a tower that is going to fall. I don't know why, they just feel obliged to like last hit the tower or hit the tower much more than necessary. If you're in close proximity to the tower, you are going to get the local gold. You don't need to be hitting it a bunch. You don't need to be last hitting it. Deny as many minions as possible. I think players just like the dopamine of getting that last hit and feeling like they destroyed the tower personally, or maybe it's just muscle memory from last hitting minions in general. Completely unnecessary. The next point is to move in and out of a bush to freeze instead of just like awkwardly standing in the middle of the lane to freeze. And so a minion wave would come along, and then you let it aggro onto you, and then you move into the bush, and then they start moving for a little bit, and then you move this way, and then this is just how you can hold a freeze without like really taking much damage at all. And so obviously I have a lot of move speed, so this isn't the greatest example, but I'm sure pro players can picture what I'm talking about here. The next point is you're pathing to lane from leash, and what I don't think many players think about is the exact pathing with which to go back to your lane. And so on red side, this is the fastest path, this is the second fastest, and this here is the slowest. So you should never path through here. The only time you should path this way, the second fastest, is if you're scared of any kind of skirmish in this river. However, a lot of the times you don't have to respect an all-in through this area. You can do a leash here and then run straight here and then start to control the lane or the bush as fast as possible. And likewise on blue side, it's not as volatile. It's either like this path or like a more safe path around here. A lot of the times, red side teams are not going to path here, so you can just default to the fastest path here to get to lane. If this becomes a metagame in itself, then maybe there'll be more contesting around this area, and the stronger level 1 duo will be able to take the fastest path to lane. Something that players should start thinking about. All right, we're going to talk about points concerning gold. So the first point is to not partake in assist if you're stealing gold from your allies. This is going to be especially important for the support and the jungle role, or just whatever kind of facilitative role you are playing in the game. And so this is only important if your team already has an assist, because you get the kill gold, you get half of that as an assist gold, and that assist gold is going to be split among whoever assists. And so let's say you have your ADC and your mid laner, and they're going to kill an enemy. If you like combo in just for the dopamine of getting an assist, you're literally stealing gold away from your carries, and that is just obviously not what you should be doing. I don't care about your KDA, right? The only argument you can make is if you have a red tree, if you have some like relentless or whatever hunter stacks that you're missing, then you can make an argument for it. Otherwise, just give your gold to your carry. This would be akin to just taking half a wave of minions in a lane just because you feel like it and it makes you feel good. So the next point is something that I've noticed for years and years and years, and it just frustrates me to no end. So in the mid to late, cannon minions, they give so much gold, and what I see is players just prioritizing tempo over actually last hitting the cannon. They just use all their spells, try to be as efficient as possible in clearing a wave, but make sure you get that cannon. You can be efficient. You can slow down for a quarter of a second, even a half of a second, just to make sure you last hit the cannon and then go about your tempo plays as per usual. This is going to be most noticeable in ADCs who build crit, and then sometimes their crit will mess up a cannon last hit. You can play around that. You can make sure that your basic auto attack will last hit the cannon. Okay, so just a couple of support points here, as I'm a support player and coach, obviously. You don't want to hit the tower as the support during a Herald charge, because if you hit it, then you're going to get all of the plates that would come from that Herald charge. I can't believe that I'm saying this, but I've just seen it so often. It is so basic, and it's so crazy how widespread that this is, but just give your gold to your carries. You don't have to just walk in and steal it. There's a difference between ensuring the Herald charges and just hanging around greedily trying to get gold. So the next point is for support gold gen items. And so the way that it works is that your support items give you a base gold gen of 2 per second, and then it increases to 3 per second once you reach 500. But once you reach 1,000 and transforms, it doesn't give any more. So the more stacks that you can get before it reaches that threshold of 1,000, the more money you can make from your support item. And so what that's going to look like, most notably with the Relic Shield or the Steel Shoulder Guards line. And so what you'll want to do is you'll want to stack up your 3 stacks close to 1,000. And then you can use all of your 3 stacks, maybe like 980, 990 in your quest line, and then you can make sometimes upwards of 1,100 golds. This is also going to be in the Spectral Sickle and the Spell Thieves line. As long as you stay in combat, then the quest won't update to the completed version and you don't get the rewards anymore. So with Spell Thieves line, stay in combat if possible and hit towers or champions if they give you the chance. And with the Relic Shield lines, stack it up at around 980, 990 and then get a big burst of gold. Okay, so I want to talk about some champ specific points now. The first one, I've been dying to say this for so long. Kennen, you need to take Cleanse or TP with Spellbook and then have your Cleanse. The amount of times that Kennen just gets absolutely removed from a team fight and having any real impact just by one exhaust is ridiculous. Kennen's identity is to find those big wombo team fights, and exhaust just destroys his engage so hard, and Cleanse completely removes exhaust. And so it's going to be hard to justify taking Cleanse over Teleport because it is so important for the laning phase and especially for those potential flank team fights. However, I do think that Kennen has the luxury of taking Teleport, even if it's just a one-off for a Cleanse around a really important team fight. I think it is worth potentially a little bit of a weaker laning phase, especially because Kennen's identity, although he can win some early lanes, it is mostly about being as impactful as possible on your item spikes around those mid to late skirmishes. And it's not like Kennen's identity is tied into a specific keystone for his laning phase. You know, I've seen First Strike, I've seen Electrocute, I've seen Airy. There is definitely an argument to be made to take Spellbook and still survive or even generate pressure in some matchups with Spellbook and have a bigger impact around where his identity is centered. The next point for supports, again, Lulus, they should be patient on their Q after Eing an enemy. And so a lot of times, I think players don't realize that her help picks is going to travel and catch up to the enemy. And so what you need to do is to either hold your Q until like after they flash, and then wait for your E, your Pixie to kind of catch up to them and then Q. Too many times I've seen 2v2 all-ins in the bot lane and then they just like E and then immediately Q and they don't give themselves the best chance of landing that. All right, next point, and this is going to be for Kalista and the team that plays with Kalista. You know, Kalista has a lot of objective securing with her Rend, and even though it was nerfed, you can still stack it up a lot. I believe the cap is 255 stacks, correct me if I'm wrong. But what players need to do is let Kalista stack up her passive, right? You don't need to be constantly DPSing Baron as the whole team the whole time. What you can do is just have someone to tank the Baron and then Kalista DPS it. You can even let Baron regen a little bit and really let Kalista stack up those Rens, because a lot of the time recently there are 50-50s where a team gets a pick, you know, they move to Baron and then they don't have enough pressure or control to appropriately gatekeep this area, and so then the jungle comes over and then it's just like pretty much a 50-50. And so if you have Kalista, she is meta right now, you definitely want to make use of her Rend, right? You can avoid this 50-50 if you don't have the control to gatekeep, stack it up, even back off, let Baron regen, the Rend stacks are going to stay on the Baron, stack it up way higher than the potential smite. Speaking of meta ADCs, we're going to be talking about Draven now. And so the way that his passive works is that if you last hit 6 minions successfully, you get an extra 2 stacks. However, relics, they do count for Draven last hitting. And so what you want to do, if you are a Draven paired with a Relic Shield support, is to have Draven's axe in mid-air while the Relic support last hits the minion. And so Draven gets an extra stack of his axe and gets the kill count for his passive, as it won't count for Draven missing the minion. And the same logic can be applied to ADCs that take fleet footwork. So if you're a Relic support, you can let your ADC get an extra auto attack to generate fleet footwork faster if you let the auto attack be in the mid-air before you execute the minion. Okay, I'm going to be moving into the general mid to late points now. And the first one I want to talk about is stopwatch timing. I'm sure that you guys have seen this as well, where an enemy stopwatches or Zhonyas, and then everyone's like trying to hit them as soon as they come out, and then they throw their abilities out too early. It doesn't hit them at all. Sometimes the person who is stopwatched or in stasis or whatever, they don't even have flash, and so there is no pressure to make sure that you perfectly time it. And so one of two things need to happen here. Players either need to go into a practice tool and really practice those timings, or to err on the side of safety here and make sure that they actually do come out of stasis before you throw your abilities, because it's much rather you're just like a quarter of a second late than a quarter of a second early. Okay, the next point, and this is one of the biggest points that is never really used, to delay kills. And so this is when an enemy player is by all means just dead. You know, there's no way that he is going to survive. And what you can do is actually test the limits of how long you can delay that kill before a spawning objective. Some people have toyed with this idea, maybe for like 5 seconds, but you can really, really push its limits here. If the enemy team, if their teammates are letting them die, then you can really just follow them around, you know, make sure that they stay low, you know, even dance, bait them into just wasting time as well, instead of what they should be doing is like damaging you as much as possible or running into a tower to make sure that they die. This is going to be important, like I said, for those spawning neutral objectives. Obviously, you don't want to be the person that pushes this too far and then lets them live or lets the enemy team come and fight, but you don't want to be the person that just instantly kills if you do have some more time to delay that kill if you can. So it is tricky to break inhib towers, especially without Baron, and this has been something that players have talked about for many, many years in terms of coordinating stacking waves, you know, stacking waves mid and then timing them to crash with a stacking wave top or with a stacking wave bot. And a lot of the time what that's going to look like is to not hit the mid lane minions at all and then to hard shove aside and then crash them at the same time. This can streamline a lot of what you can get from Baron buff, but even without Baron buff, if there are no neutrals and all the outers and inners are down, then you can crash these stacked timed waves to potentially make a play on that window. The next point is to potentially drop and reapply Baron buff on your cannons. So let's say that you're trying to siege a tower and all of the minions die except a cannon, and then the cannon, let's say this is your cannon, this is just awkwardly standing outside, and the cannon's hitting the tower, and then you can't hit the tower yourself because it's out of the tower range, right? And so what you can do is you can just drop back, stop applying the Baron buff to the cannon, let the cannon enter the tower's auto attack range, and you reapply it, and then you can siege it while the cannon is also hitting it. And this is going to be the most useful when you're trying to rush down their base and all of the minions die except the cannon and there's no opposition in front of you. There will be situations where even if there are enemy champions in front of you, that you can use this tool just to start sieging a little bit faster. The last topic I want to touch on is for junglers. And even as a support main who never really plays jungle at all, it is painfully obvious when junglers are not optimizing what they do. And in my opinion, this is inexcusable because this is the most structured early game role in terms of the jungle is always there with the same times, with the same DPS on your first clear. So players have started to optimize the passive burn damage from the starting jungle items to finish small monsters or the scuttle. This should be used with red buff as well, so that you don't have to always hang around and, you know, do the final blow to a monster. The two biggest points of improvement for optimizing jungle clears, is, from what I've noticed, is for players to make use of the patience bar a little bit better, and to really figure out how much you can test this patience and clear towards the next area that you want to be. If you just pay attention to a typical pro jungler clear nowadays, the patience bar is rarely going to drop to that last bar. And then the final point is to maximize like doing 2 camps at once. This is mainly going to be applied to the Gromp and the Blue. And if you're a jungler with any type of AoE clear whatsoever, then you should be double jungling these 2 camps. Especially because Gromp gives that missing resources after you clear the camp. So you will see this on, you know, some junglers like Fiddlesticks, he'll drain these 2 camps, or like Karthus, he'll draw them in. Any champ with AoE should be able to double clear these camps. Thanks for watching, everyone. Obviously, this was a very heavy bias on the support role. My experience and my knowledge is mostly tailored to Vision or to, you know, the bot lane micro and laning. This is just some of what I have been observing. So please consider liking and subscribing, but only if you've enjoyed this type of content. And I also want to give a big thank you to my students in Honor Roll for helping me in my dream to make this League of Legends coaching a full-time occupation. So you can check out my Patreon link for coaching, for VODs of coaching sessions, answers, and more, or to apply for individual coaching too. The links are going to be down below as usual. Thanks again for watching, and goodbye.